Being buried alive for one man in France was almost one of the worst deaths imaginable. Hello, true crimerers. This is the story of Angelo Hayes. Subscribe for more true crime content. The story takes place in 1937 in France to 19-year-old Angelo Hayes. One day in 1937, he was riding his motorcycle when he crashed and flew into a brick wall. He was horrifically disfigured, and at the hospital, he would be pronounced dead. They did this by determining he had no pulse. And so he was buried, and a funeral was held. No, he wasn't embalmed, and I don't know why. 2 days later, there was an insurance claim that required them to exhume his body, and good thing they did, because Angelo Hayes was still alive. He wasn't dead, he had been in a coma, but he awoke in the coffin and survived for 48 hours. He would go on to recover and live a full life. He even invented a new coffin. Being stuck in a chimney is one of the worst fates a person could have. This is another worst deaths imaginable. Viewer discretion is advised. This story occurred in Natchez, Mississippi. In 1985, a 27-year-old man named Calvin Wilson went missing. A year later, the skeletal remains of a person was found next to a river. That skeleton was identified as Calvin Wilson. So they thought, this is a sad ending, but we have him home, end of story. It was not. In January of 2001, there were some construction guys doing work on rebuilding an old gift shop in Natchez, Mississippi. The chimney that was a part of this building had always been there, but it also wasn't ever used, or it hadn't been used in a very, very, very long time. As a matter of fact, it was essentially sealed off. But once the construction crew broke through the walls, they found something in the chimney, a human skeleton. The skeletal remains were seen in a pair of parachute pants, a muscle shirt. There was also jewelry and a pay stub attached to these remains. And those helped identify the skeletal remains. They were 27-year-old Calvin Wilson. To confirm, they got dental records and DNA, and it was a match. This was a confirmed identity. The person they found by the river, don't know how they identified them as Calvin, but it was not Calvin. At the time this case would have occurred, this was a gift shop. What they believe is that Calvin had entered the chimney head first and in an attempt to eventually rob this place. He got roughly 15 feet down. Again, he is upside down, head first, and he got stuck. Because the chimney, at that point, I guess he didn't realize this, was already sealed off below, nobody would hear him screaming. Now, it sounds like there was still obviously an opening on the top because that's how he got in. So I'm guessing if he was screaming for help, nobody heard him. And so he remained trapped in that chimney. They don't know exactly how he died because all they had were his skeletal remains. A lot of times what happens is people will die of positional asphyxia or possibly starvation. There were no broken bones, so it's not like his neck snapped or anything like that. So the odds are is he was alive when he went into that chimney and got stuck. He was alive for some time and nobody could hear him. Eventually the top of the chimney was sealed off, but nobody noticed he was down there. Therefore, there were no odors that permeated through the building or outside of it, so nobody would smell anything. There's a chance he may have been alive for a couple of days. If it was positional asphyxia, he probably would have died within maybe a few minutes or so. Either way, whether it's a few minutes or a couple of days, or at least several hours, it is one of the absolute worst ways a person could go, especially if, you're claustrophobic. But being trapped where you can't breathe because, your chest can't expand fully, or maybe you can, but you can't eat anything or drink anything and nobody hears you. That is an absolutely horrendous fate. This infamous scene from the movie Hereditary, it happened in real life. Hello, true crimerers. Viewer discretion is advised. In August of 2004, Francis Brom was in a vehicle with his friend, and that would be John Hutcherson, and this was in Marietta, Georgia. Both men were drunk. John was driving the vehicle drunk. It's believed that at one point Francis had to vomit, so he stuck his head out of the window, and when John, who was driving erratically because he was drunk, they made connection with a telephone pole. Specifically, Francis's head hit the telephone pole, and he was decapitated immediately. John drives home, gets out of the car, and leaves the headless corpse in his vehicle. The body was discovered the following morning. He pled guilty to vehicular manslaughter and was given just 5 years in prison. This is one of the worst deaths imaginable. Viewer discretion is advised. Follow for more true crime content. In September of 2014, at Huaqiao University in China, a young man would enter the elevator when, for some unknown reason, his foot gets stuck in the crack between the outside and the elevator. And then the elevator begins to move, and there is nothing he or anyone can do about it. Soon he is essentially dragged up to the top of the elevator while his torso and left leg are still inside the elevator and the rest of him is outside. The incident took place at about 5:50 p.m. and just a few short minutes later, emergency services arrive. But unfortunately, over the course of those few minutes, the young man would suffocate to death. His chest was crushed and compressed, and unfortunately he died a slow and probably very painful death. He would be crushed to death at work in one of the worst deaths imaginable. Viewer discretion is advised. The story happened in 2009 at the Phipps Bend Industrial Park at Aladdin Plastics in Tennessee. The victim was 61-year-old Lonnie Mowell. Lonnie worked on machines that would mold plastic chairs, something kind of like that. One of these machines was an injection molding machine. This is what it looks like on the inside. As he was working on it, a chair got stuck underneath, so he had to crawl underneath the machine to get the jam out. He left a small door open on the machine because when you left it open, the machine was supposed to stop. But for some reason, due to a malfunction, when he crawled underneath it, the machine kicked back on. Lonnie was then dragged into the machine, where unfortunately, he would be slowly crushed to death. And he went through hell for at least a minute or two. Lonnie had worked there for 38 years. Never with an incident. If his family sued, it's not public knowledge. Hello, true crimerers. This is Deaths at Theme Parks. Viewer discretion is advised. Please subscribe for more true crime content. This incident took place at Great America, which is in California. This took place in August of 1999. 12-year-old Joshua Smurfat was there with friends and family that day when they would get aboard the Drop Zone ride. The ride goes all the way up to the top here, and then it takes like a very drastic drop where it slows down towards the bottom. Apparently, when it was about 50 to 75 feet up, Joshua's harness became unbuckled somehow he slipped out of it, and he fell roughly 75 feet to the concrete below, where he landed on his head and died instantly. The ride operator swears the harness was buckled in. Witnesses saw it come up, but no one knows for sure. The family did sue, but I do not know the outcome. Unusual ways people have died. Hello, true crimerers. Viewer discretion is advised. This particular story happened in 2004 in the state of Washington by a 24-year-old man named Philip Quinn, picture not found. For some unknown reason, Philip took one of his lava lamps and, well, he put it on top of a lit stove. Again, no one knows why he did this. The lava lamp would heat up to extreme temperatures, and then it exploded. Shards of gas would basically explode towards him, and one of them pierced through his chest and directly into his heart. He managed to stumble his way back into his bedroom, where he collapsed on his bed and he died. He was found a day or so later. There were no drugs and no alcohol in his system, and to this day no one knows why he did it. Do not try that ever at home. He was gunned down just outside of his son's home, and his murder remains unsolved. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Hallie Wing. Viewer discretion is advised. At the time of this case, Hallie Wing was a happily married 76-year-old man. He's pictured here with his wife, Bernice. And Hallie was a retired law enforcement officer. He worked for the California Department of Corrections. Hallie was a father and a grandfather. And the family lived in this little tiny community in California called Rescue. And murder is not something that they were really used to in this area. On June 2nd, 1986, Hallie Wing and his wife Bernice were preparing to celebrate their son's 49th birthday. Their son lived in this home, which was across from their property. Well, before the birthday festivities, Bernice would notice that there was a mysterious car parked in front of her son's home. This is a recreation, by the way. It was a blue sedan. It was not a car they recognized. It certainly wasn't their son's car. So Hallie walks over there to see what's going on, and Bernice stays on her property and kind of watches with binoculars. And that's when she sees one of two men get into the passenger side of the blue sedan. And as Hallie begins to walk towards them, gunshots ring out. Hallie Wing had been shot dead. She then observes another person get into the driver's side of this blue sedan, and the car speeds away. She contacts the police, but by the time any rescuers arrive, it's already too late. Her husband is deceased. There were a couple items stolen from their son's home. 3 jewelry boxes, 2 different high school class rings, and then there were several guns stolen from the home, including a 12-gauge shotgun, a Remington 22 caliber gun, and at least 1 rifle. The serial number on one of the stolen guns was 1159528. But sadly, whoever did this has yet to be caught. They don't know if these were people who knew their son and was out to rob them on purpose, and then Hallie just interrupted them, and so he had to get killed because he would recognize them, or this was a random home invasion. But this was a small community, and they lived in a property that's not exactly like a well-populated area, so it felt like this was targeted. The son apparently does not have any idea on who would have done this, but they have exhausted every investigative lead, and they are still nowhere. Surely somebody somewhere out there knows who shot and killed Hallie Wing on that day in 1976. Obviously, it's been several decades, but his killer could still very likely be out there. And somebody somewhere out there has got to know the truth, and perhaps that someone is you. If you have any information on the murder of Hallie Wing in 1976, please call 1-800-222-7463. A known child killer would confess to the crime, but would the body ever be found? Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Jamie Lusher. Viewer discretion is advised. At the time of this case, James Lusher, who would go by Jamie to everyone, was 16 years old and lived in Westfield, Massachusetts. And he did have a sister. Jamie's sister would describe him as like a spark, that you had to see that spark at just the right moment. And if you happened to catch that spark, you would absolutely adore him. Jamie did grow up with some developmental disabilities. He had been attending an alternative school in Westfield, Massachusetts when this case occurred. Jamie loved going on bike rides. He had this green Huffy mountain bike that he always rode. On November 6, 1992, the then 16-year-old boy would get onto his bike and he would make a 12-mile trek to his grandmother's house, something he did often. Jamie never made it to his grandma's house, and Jamie never came home. Once, the grandma and the dad figured out that Jamie is nowhere, they report him missing. What's interesting is that 2 days after he's reported missing, there is someone who works at a local restaurant who said they saw Jamie. And then on November 11th, a couple of hunters found Jamie's abandoned bike. They searched that area where the bike was found, but they found nothing. And unfortunately, his case goes cold until 2013. A convicted child serial killer named Louis Lent, who looks like a young poor man's Mr. Magoo, he had murdered another young boy named James Bernardo, and also the murder of 12-year-old Sarah Ann Wood. James was also 12. Well, he would come forward to state that he was the one who kidnapped and murdered Jamie. Police dug into his confession, and they confirmed, without a shadow of a doubt, he was in Westfield, Massachusetts when Jamie disappeared. And he gave an incredibly detailed description of what he did to him. And his version of events was so descriptive, with so much information, especially with regards to like what Jamie was wearing, the description of his bike, and other details not released publicly. They were confident that this was the guy who killed him. He told police that he dumped Jamie's body in Greenwater Pond in Massachusetts. So in 2013 or so, they get a bunch of people to go out there and thoroughly search this. And they search it for days. They spend a very long time, and they are incredibly thorough, including like digging up dirt underneath. They don't find him. They do believe, I would say with probably 99% certainty, that Louis Lent is the person responsible for kidnapping and murdering Jamie Lusher. They just don't have that proof, though. So he's never been officially charged or gone to trial for it. Jamie's dad said that Louis Lent put his son into a body of water that he would have loved, and he now considers that his final resting place. But they still don't have him, and he's never really gotten any justice. A man would be missing for 27 years and would be found in the most unusual location. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Joseph Schexnayder. Viewer discretion is advised. The story took place in Abbeville in Louisiana. I do apologize if I said that wrong. The story takes us to the Bank of Abbeville. I guess the second floor wasn't really used super often. In August of 2011, they were doing some renovation on the bank. The second floor of this bank did have a chimney. So as the construction team is doing some renovation, they get to the chimney portion of it, and when they reach inside, they feel something like fabric. When the construction guy tugged on the clothing, more clothing fell down, as well as human bones. It turns out that in this chimney was the full skeleton of a person. The skeletal remains would be identified to a man who had been missing for 27 years, named Joseph Schexnayder. Joseph was 22 years old in 1984, which was the last time anyone ever saw him. He was described as very sweet-natured. He was a kind, funny guy. He would leave home for long periods of time. As a matter of fact, he really wasn't reported missing because when he didn't come back home one day, they just assumed he was just doing the normal Joseph thing. He would go from job to job. But why was he in the chimney? Well, that's the mystery. Nobody knows. The roof of this building is actually pretty easy to get to. For someone to be in that chimney, it really only implies one thing. Possibly a robbery. Just shortly before his disappearance, was wanted for stealing a car. There is a possibility that he may have been trying to hide from police and just tried to hide himself in the chimney, not realizing he couldn't get out of it. The other theory is that he was planning to rob the bank, and he wanted to go through the chimney to do so. Because of the location of this chimney, it narrows down severely towards the bottom. If he went down there willingly, he got stuck. He more than likely did not die right away. He was probably stuck in there for some time. He was probably screaming and crying for help, at least at some point, but nobody heard him. And what's even more unbelievable is that the decayed human body that was stuck in this chimney for 27 years, the smell apparently never permeated enough to get people's attention. But he was eventually returned home, and his remains were buried properly. And I can't even imagine the horror of being stuck in this claustrophobic tiny space, not being able to properly breathe properly, with no hope. You can't get out. It's a nightmare scenario to me. In the end, at least Joseph's family got him back, and they got to lay him to rest. And the circumstances of why Joseph Schexnayder was in that chimney may remain a mystery forever. This monster killed her with a pepper grinder. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Lee Jennings. Viewer discretion is advised. Lee Jennings was born on May 14th, 1944, and she grew up in Florence, Kentucky. But eventually she would move out to Aurora, Indiana. Lee was a mother and a grandmother. And just a few months before this case occurred, she became a great-grandmother. And everybody loved her. Lee was a very spiritual woman, a very positive type energy, and she greatly influenced a lot of people in a very positive way. People described her as very warm, very inviting, and just all around a really lovely woman. And what happened to her was just so brutal. This was Lee's home in Aurora, Indiana. On April 5th, 2012, Lee's body was found inside her home. It was a brutal attack. She had been bludgeoned to death. Eventually, they learned that she had been struck several times with a skillet, and then she was beaten to death with this large pepper grinder. It was an unbelievably savage attack. Lee, who was 67 years old at the time of her death, was not very trusting of banks, and so she kept most of her cash in safes inside of her home. And it turns out that cash had been missing. In one of the safes, however, was a note. It was like a promissory note, and it was about a loan to a man named Charles Stevenson. He had been friends or acquaintances with Lee. So they looked into him. They discovered that he had called Lee's house and also was exchanging text messages with her sometime around March 29th. They then discovered that Lee had loaned him money, and he knew where her money was kept. On March 30th, he actually goes into one of the people he owes money to and gives them $1,000 in cash. Money they can confirm he did not have just a couple of days prior. He says he borrowed it from a friend named John, but John said, no, he didn't. On May 9th, 2012, they go to Charles' home and they find him on his bed covered in blood. He had attempted to end his own life, but failed. There was a suicide note that basically stated how much in debt he was, but he did not kill Lee. In an interesting little twist, this here is Charles Stevenson's aunt and uncle, Peggy and William Stevenson. They too were murdered inside their home in 2011, and their nephew Charles Stevenson was a suspect in their murders. There was DNA found at their crime scene, however, that did not match Charles. And police don't consider him a viable suspect in their murders, but there are some people who believe he may still have been involved. There was DNA found on the pepper grinder and on the skillet used to kill Lee. DNA that would come back to matching Charles Stevenson. They also found a fingerprint in a location that it should not have been if he wasn't there. So he is arrested and he's charged with Lee Jennings' murder. He goes on trial for murder and for robbery, because that was his motive, robbery, and he is found guilty. And he is sentenced to life in prison without parole. And Lee got the justice she rightfully deserved. This is worst unusual deaths, and it is incredibly vile, so viewer discretion is advised. This was Kenneth Pinion. He was an engineer for Boeing. He also distributed zoophilic pornography. He was into animal sex, having intercourse with animals, in particular horses. This is like Equus shit or something. I didn't think this happened in real life. In July of 2005 in King County, Washington, Kenneth Pinion and another gentleman broke onto a farm, somehow made the horse aroused, and then had the horse have anal sex with him. The horse penetrated Kenneth. Oddly enough, Kenneth nicknamed this horse, I shit you not, Big Dick. Kenneth would get a perforated colon from this. He was killed by the horse who was giving him anal. Folks, don't do this shit. Hello, true crimerers. This is a case where someone went missing on Christmas Eve. Viewer discretion is advised. 32-year-old Riley Hogan, and he was from Valrico, Florida, which is also Hillsborough County. In the very early morning hours of Christmas Eve 2021, he was over at a friend's house who was having a party. At approximately 4:52 a.m., he would leave the house and say he was going back to his home. He got onto his 2010 blue Kawasaki motorcycle and left, and he's never been seen since. They have searched high and low for him, but have come up with nothing. The main theory they might have is that his tires were actually pretty bald, and that he may have gotten into some kind of accident, but his bike nor him have ever been found. And that's kind of unusual considering they've searched everywhere. If you have any information, you can contact that number below. This is one of the worst deaths imaginable. Viewer discretion is advised. This was 18-year-old college student Nikki Castoris, who lived in the Orange County, California area with her parents. On Halloween 2006, she would have lunch with her family. They got into a big fight. Her parents had taken away her driving privileges because she was caught smoking. After lunch, Nikki did something that would end up taking her life. She stole her father's Porsche, which she was forbidden from driving. She then sped onto the Highway 241 over 100 miles per hour. She clipped another car, which caused her to speed across multiple lanes, where she then crashed head-on into a concrete, toll booth thing. This is what happened to the car. She died instantly. Her head had been severed in half, and her body was crushed. Those photos were leaked. I do not advise you look for them. Hello, true crimerers. We have ourselves another 1-minute murder story. And this is the case of 36-year-old Adam Markert. Viewer discretion is advised. On December 4th, 2018, in Coinjock, North Carolina, never heard of that place, sheriff's officers would be called to the home of Pam Molesky. They entered the home a little after 7:50 p.m. and discovered the murdered body of Adam Markert. He had been stabbed 83 times, 30 times in just his head and neck. And then he was shot many times after he was dead. The suspect? 27-year-old Lucas Molesky, the son of Pam Molesky, who Pam was dating Adam. Police would encounter Lucas in a standoff in Chesapeake, where eventually they were able to arrest him. He then pleaded guilty to murder. What was his motive? He didn't give one, and neither has the prosecution. He got life without parole. Hello, true crimerers. This is the 60-second case of Adrian Amicons. Viewer discretion is advised. Adrienne was a 14-year-old Indigenous girl who lived in the Ontario, Canada area. And I do not have a lot of information about this case either. On December 18th, 1997, she was at her home when a neighbor, 40-year-old Jean Ann Rudsky, a woman who battled schizophrenia, entered the home of Adrienne and just murdered her. She did so by decapitating the young girl. Why she did it? Unknown. And the only information I could find, and this is very similar to what happened in the Tim McLean case, is that Jean was found not criminally responsible for the murder because of her mental health. But what happened to her, I don't know. But she was not put in prison for a brutal and senseless murder of a 14-year-old girl. This is the case of Alex Hidalgo, and I want to give you a fair warning. Viewer discretion is advised on this one. In July of 2018, 37-year-old Alex Hidalgo was watching his son, Alex Hidalgo Jr., who was 10 months old at the time, and his mother was out shopping. When she came home, she found Alex Hidalgo sitting on the couch, reading a Bible. He was also watching religious sermons. The baby was nowhere to be found when she got home, and so she asked Alex Hidalgo, "Where's the baby?" Alex would calmly and coldly tell her the baby is dead. Alex said the baby had the number 666 on his body, so Alex built an altar and sacrificed his baby, and then threw him in a garbage can where his mother found him. The 10-month-old had been stabbed 3 times. In March of this year, Alex would go on to admit what he did to avoid the death penalty, and he got 26 years to life. Hello, true crimeers. This is the 1-minute case of Armand Johnson. Viewer discretion is advised. Please subscribe for more true crime content. Armand was a 44-year-old man who lived on the Big Island of Hawaii. He moved there in 1984. He had hosted a radio show there in Hawaii. Well, he would be reported missing on April 11th, 2005. 2 days later, he would be found. He was found on a trail just off of the Mamalahoa Highway. He was lying face down, and he had been shot in the back or the lower neck area. His car was missing, and it's never been found. Unfortunately, that's all there is. This was a seemingly random murder. His friends said he was into drugs, but they weren't sure if that was related. He had no enemies. They have very few leads, almost no tips. If you have info, you can call 888-653-0009. Hello, true crimeers. It's time for another 1-minute murder story, and it's also today's Thanksgiving story. Viewer discretion is advised. This was 49-year-old Keith Oliver, and on Thanksgiving Day 2009, he was celebrating with his family in Colorado Springs, Colorado. His 75-year-old father, Ayelis Clay Oliver, well, he asked his son to do some chores for the holiday. Allegedly, Keith said no. This would cause something we're all used to on Thanksgiving, hours of arguing. And after some time, Keith's mother, Marjorie, would ask her son to just leave. He apparently said no. So, Ayelis went upstairs, retrieved his .357 revolver, and shot his own son through the head, killing him. The father was arrested and detained. I just can't find what his sentence was. How do you kill your own kid? Hello, true crimeers. This is the 1-minute missing persons case of Sharitha Morrison. On February 26, 2021, 38-year-old mother of 2, Sharitha Morrison, dropped her daughter off at elementary school. And this is in Englewood, which is in Chicago, Illinois. Sharitha was expected to meet with her son a couple hours after that, but she never showed up, and whenever he tried to call her, it went straight to voicemail. Later that afternoon, she never picked up her daughter from school, and she was absolutely expected to do that. Sometime after she dropped her daughter off at school, she was seen driving her vehicle. It was a 2016 Porsche Cayenne SUV near Birchwood and Winchester Avenue. A couple days later, her car on March 1st was found abandoned. There was absolutely no sign of Sharitha. Sharitha is 4'11", approximately 140 pounds, and was pregnant with her 3rd child. To this day, her whereabouts are still unknown. If you have information, you can contact this number here. Hello, true crimeers. It is time for another 1-minute murder story. Viewer discretion is advised. Pictured here was 19-year-old Destiny Underwood from Fulton, Mississippi. She was married to 23-year-old Avery Underwood, and they had recently had a child. On June 5th, 2018, police would respond to a call from her house. This was around 6 o'clock in the morning. When police got there, Destiny Underwood was dead. Her 8-month-old baby was in the house, but the baby was fine. 23-year-old Avery Underwood would be arrested the following day. Why did he do it? Why did he strangle and kill his wife? A motive was never released. Sadly, there are far too many cases just like this. Cases with no information. A man murders his wife and we don't ever get to know why. And I wish that I could tell more of her story. Hey, let's do a murder quickie. Ugh. And I'm gonna fit it in a minute. This candidate for World's Worst Mother of 1983 is Diane Downs. Diane here was originally from where I live now, Phoenix, Arizona, which is where she met her husband, Steve Downs. The two of them had 3 children together, Christy Ann, Cheryl Lynn, and Stephen. Diane and Steve divorced in 1980. Candidate for World's Worst Wife was having an extramarital affair with a man named Robert Knickerbocker. He eventually would claim that she was stalking him. He was excited when she moved to Springfield, Oregon. On May 19, 1983, Diane shot her 3 children in the car. Cheryl died immediately, Stephen became paralyzed from the waist down, and Christy suffered a stroke. Diane had 1 shot in her left forearm. She claimed they were shot by a carjacker, but forensics didn't line up with that. She was convicted in 1984 of murder and attempted murder, and was sentenced to life plus 50 years. Hello, true crimerers. It's time for another 1-minute murder story. Viewer discretion is advised. This was 29-year-old Elizabeth Barraza, and she lived in Tomball, Texas. On January 25th, 2019, a doorbell camera would show Elizabeth's husband leaving for work. Stalking behind is a black pickup truck. Elizabeth was outside setting up a garage sale. She was trying to earn money because it was their anniversary and they wanted to plan a trip. Sadly, that wouldn't get to happen. At 6:53 a.m., just a couple of minutes after her husband left, an unknown assailant would walk up to Elizabeth as she was setting up the garage sale. They exchanged words for about 5 seconds before the unknown person lifted a gun and shot her multiple times until she fell to the ground. A couple of seconds later, they fired 1 more shot, and then they fled. The murder was all caught on camera, but to this day, police have no suspects. Hello, true crimerers. This is going to be a 1-minute murder story, and it is the case of Helen Madden. Viewer discretion is advised. Unfortunately, I do not have any photos of the victim. But on November 30th, 1989, in Hazard, Kentucky, 61-year-old Helen Madden was working at her laundromat. At some point towards the end of the day for closing, a man walked in. His name was Donald Herb Johnson. He asked Helen if he could use the phone. She said no. Donald did not like that answer. So he pulled out a knife and he stabbed her 24 times. He then sexually assaulted her and then mutilated the elderly woman's body. And then he went to go have dinner, just casually. But because he was sloppy, he was caught the next day and he admitted to it. He pled guilty and was given the death sentence.
Actually went through with some urges you had, whether you're attracted to little girls or whatever
I've never been attracted to little girls or little boys.
At 11:30 p.m. on May 13th, 1997, Kirsten Hatfield was put to bed by her mother. At around 6 a.m. the following morning, Kirsten's mother went in to check on her, only to find that her bed was empty and Kirsten was gone. After exhaustively searching for her, they called the police and reported her as missing. Authorities collected evidence around the property. They found traces of blood on the windowsill of her bedroom and the underwear she was wearing the night before in the backyard with blood on them. It wasn't until 18 years later when they got a match to the blood samples to being Anthony Palma, a former neighbor of the Hatfield family. He would be sentenced to life in prison in 2017. He always denied it and refused to tell where her body was. And in 2019, he was killed in prison, and Kirsten was lost forever. This is the disappearance of Madeline Teresa Pons. On November 11th, 1986, Madeline was working alone at a convenience store. No, not this one. This store was off of Highway 82 in Columbus, Mississippi. The last time she was seen was actually by her mother when her mom dropped off some dinner earlier in that evening. Literally 5 minutes later, another customer walks in the store and no one is there. Madeline was gone. She vanished. And she has literally not been seen ever since. There was about $600 missing from the till. Her car was still in the parking lot with her purse, her keys, her wallet, her hairbrush, and other personal belongings of hers were still left in the store as well. Now, Madeline lived in Alabama, so both Alabama and Mississippi authorities are working on this case. It's been a little under 35 years since she went missing. This would be an age progression photo of what she would look like now, but the odds aren't good that she's still alive. But maybe someone will recognize her. This is the lesser-known disappearance of Morgan Nick. On June 9th, 1995, 6-year-old Morgan Nick and her mother, Colleen, were attending a Little League baseball game in the city of Alma, Arkansas. At around 10:30 p.m., Morgan went to go catch fireflies with some of her friends who were also there. Her mother reluctantly let her go do this. The last time anyone reported seeing her was 10:45 p.m., which is her friends who say they saw her last. They said she was by her mother's car emptying sand from her shoes. Her friends said they saw a very creepy man talking to her, and that was the last time anyone has seen her. It's been nearly 26 years, and there's been virtually no leads. In 2002, they received a tip that she might have been buried in Boonville, Arkansas, but police found nothing. In 2010, they got another tip and searched a home in Spiro, Oklahoma. Cadaver dogs even picked up a scent there, but nothing was ever found. In '96, her mother started the Morgan Nick Foundation to help parents with missing children. Hello, true crimerers. This is another missing or murdered Indigenous woman case where I do not have much to tell you. There is not even a photo of the victim. 33-year-old Naoma Alexandra George lived in the Wapato area of Washington State. She was raised in the Waashat religion at the Toppenish Longhouse. She was a mother of 8 children. She was a wonderful bead maker, and she was very much in touch with her traditions. On the morning of October 15th, 2013, Naoma's body would be discovered. She had been beaten to death and just left in an alley. And that is literally all the information I have. There are no suspects. Even though someone clearly murdered her, there is nothing. If you have information about Naoma's murder, you can call 509-877-4275. Hello, true crimerers. It is time for another 1-minute murder story. And it is the case of Robert Ellingwood. Viewer discretion is advised. There is very little information on this case. On March 15th, 1997, 25-year-old Robert Ellingwood in Mobile, Alabama, was at Cathedral Square when he was approached by 2 individuals. They would ask him for a cigarette, and then they would attempt to rob him. He then tried to flee, and they shot him dead. Now, he was the 3rd person approached under the same circumstances, being asked for a cigarette and then robbed. The first 2 victims survived. These are composites of what the suspects would look like. To this day, the case is officially unsolved, but police had a suspect named Marcus Lockett, a known drug dealer, but never had evidence to pin on him. But he is now in prison serving a 20-year sentence for drug dealing. So, possible justice? This is the case of Ronnie Shelton. What did you do? You committed permicide up there? Did your head get into a tussle with a porcupine? Is this the case of bad Paul Reiser impressions? Ron was nicknamed the West Side Rapist. He sexually assaulted over 30 different women. He would break into their homes while wearing some sort of face cover. Look, even this guy fucking wears a mask. He would tell all of his victims, "I'm just here to rob you," but then he would end up sexually assaulting them. He told all of them, "Don't you look at me." He did all of this, by the way, in Cleveland, Ohio. He was eventually caught using the ATM card of one of his victims. He did not kill anyone. He was charged with rape, aggravated burglary, felonious assault, gross sexual imposition, kidnapping, intimidation, theft, aggravated robberies, cutting telephone lines. He was found guilty of 220 charges and was sentenced to 3,195 years. In 2018, he jumped off the roof of the prison, cracked his skull, and died. We have ourselves another murder case to talk about, and we're going to fit it in a minute. On Friday, March 27th, 2009, in Tracy, California, 8-year-old Sandra Cantu was reported missing at 7:53 p.m. by her parents. This is surveillance footage of Sandra skipping across the street shortly before her disappearance. This is the last time she would ever be seen alive. She was skipping towards the home of 28-year-old Sunday school teacher Melissa Huckabee, who had a daughter that was Sandra's friend. On the day Sandra was reported missing, Melissa also decided to report a suitcase as missing because that was somehow important. Melissa here suffered from schizophrenia and several other mental health issues. On April 6, 2009, 8-year-old Sandra Cantu's body was found stuffed into a suitcase when a nearby irrigation pond was being drained. She was beaten and sexually abused and then smothered to death. Due to her very unusual behavior, Melissa Huckabee was arrested, and then evidence linked her to the crime. She pled guilty and got life. We got ourselves another killer, and we're gonna fit it in a minute. This is Stevie McCreepy McDaniel.
They have recovered the body or whatever they recovered from there.
Howdy.
Had you seen anything there?
Uh-oh.
Had you seen anything there? I mean, we don't know if this is the same person. You know what I mean?
In Macon, Georgia, at approximately 4:30 in the morning on Sunday, June 26, 2011, Stephen McDaniel entered the home of his next-door neighbor, Lauren Giddings, who were fellow classmates at Mercer College of Law. Lauren Giddings was just a couple months away from taking her bar exam. Stephen here was a peeping Tom. He would peer into her windows at night. He even recorded her empty apartment at one point. But on June 26, 2011, when she was asleep, he broke into her apartment. She woke up, he jumped on top of her and strangled her to death. And then he dismembered her body and threw her in the garbage, which is what the news was telling him in that interview. He got life. Hello, true crimeers. This is the 1-minute case of Tamara Lafram Boys. Viewer discretion is advised. By March of 2019, Tamara was a 46-year-old woman who lived in the Yankton, South Dakota area. She was a mother of 2 adult children who she loved dearly. Her personality was described as one that she never really knew a stranger, that everyone was just immediately her friend. She loved motorcycles. She loved, living on the wild side a little bit. She was just a fun person. She also had a very turbulent relationship with this man, 45-year-old Stephen Falkenberg. Very on-again, off-again relationship. On March 16, 2019, according to him, the two of them got into a very big argument. He pushed her and she struck her head, which he said killed her. Instead of going to police, he dismembered her body, drove her body to Michigan and put her in several locations. Only parts of her have ever been found. He got life without parole. Hello, true crimeers. This is the 1-minute case of Terry Ann Fourchere, Fourchager. There's really no information on her, but she was originally from North Carolina, but by the time this story took place, she had traveled to Reno, Nevada, and she moved there in November of 1995. On August 10th, 1996, she had left the Flamingo Hotel, and she told a friend she was going on a date with a man whose name she didn't say who it was. It's not known if she ever made it to that date, but Terry has never been seen since. The man she was supposed to go on a date with has never come forward. And that's literally all they have on this. At one point, a serial killing duo known as the Speed Freak Killers were assumed to maybe have killed her. They even searched one of their properties and they found no remains there. I guess the tip came from literally one of them before they were executed. But now they're gone, and Terry has just vanished forever.
Open it. It was sweet. It stinks, y'all.
Do you all remember that? On June 19th, 2020, a group of teens using an app called Random Nautica found a suitcase on a beach in Seattle. They would then call 911 when they realized the suitcase might contain a human body, which police would confirm did. Police then found another bag with another human body in it. It was the bodies of 27-year-old Austin Wenner and 35-year-old Jessica Lewis. Based on the autopsies, it's believed they were killed about 9 days prior to them being found. They were both shot dead. Turns out they were killed by 62-year-old poor man Santa Claus, Michael Lee Dudley. He was the couple's landlord. He believed the couple was bringing home unwanted criminal activity to the home, and also because they weren't paying their rent. The day he murdered the couple, he had another person move into the home. He's still awaiting trial. Hello, true crimeers. Let's tell another 1-minute murder story. Between 1990 and 1991, an unknown assailant would kidnap and murder 3 different women. 18-year-old Robin Meehan, Her body was found just thrown in a garbage bin in the woods in Missouri. Sandy Little, who is in her 20s, her body would be found in a box thrown into the woods in another county in Missouri. And then 27-year-old Brenda Jean Pruitt. Her body was found tied between two mattresses, no, not these ones, and again thrown in the woods in a different county in Missouri. The person responsible? No clue. He's been nicknamed the package killer because of the way the bodies were found. Two of the girls were known to be escorts, but the St. Louis police have arrested nobody. In fact, there really is very little information on this story at all. It could be the work of a killer duo. Hello, true crimerers. This is the 1-minute case of Tyler Stice. Subscribe for more true crime content. 20-year-old Tyler Stice lived in Kingman, Arizona with his family. He's approximately 6 feet tall, 130 pounds, with brown hair and brown eyes. On June 21st, 2016, at approximately 5:30 in the morning, Tyler got up and left for work. But Tyler never made it to work. Tyler has never been seen again. 4 days after his disappearance, his completely clean black Mustang was found at the Deer Canyon recreational area near Kingman. And this is at the Hualapai mountain range. His wallet, keys, cell phone, and laptop were all missing from the car. His camera was in the car, with pictures deleted. Police discovered that a day or so before his disappearance, he purchased a rifle. That rifle has never been found. No trace of him, dead or alive, has ever been found. And they have searched that entire area. He had no enemies. Call here if you have info. True crimerers, this is the 1-minute missing persons case of Alan Haramati. Viewer discretion is advised. Unfortunately, there is very little information about his case. Alan Haramati was living in the Petaluma, California area, and at the time of this case, he is 59 years old. The last time his family heard from him was on June 29th, 2010. So he was reported missing by his family once they couldn't get a hold of him and they couldn't find him. On July 1st, 2010, his white suburban vehicle was found. I guess it was found at Point Reyes by California State Parks. The keys were still in the ignition. His wallet and his cell phone were inside the car, but Alan was nowhere to be found. Alan was 5'8" with blue eyes, 180 pounds, and his family does believe that he is likely deceased. If you have any information, please contact 707-778-4332. Help get Alan back home. This is the 1-minute missing persons case of Barbara Lee Norton. Viewer discretion is advised. This particular story happened in Willits, California, which is in the Northern California area. At the time of this case, Barbara Lee Norton was 53 years old. On April 8th, 2014, a friend of Barbara's would report her missing after not seeing or hearing from her in a week. When police investigated Barbara's apartment, they found her purse, her wallet, her cell phone. Everything, all left behind. Barbara was nowhere to be found. The apartment did not look like any foul play had occurred, and nothing seemed to be stolen. Barbara was someone who was known to disappear for a couple of days or maybe even a couple of weeks, but always came back, and always brought her cell phone and money. Her last text message she ever sent was to a friend, and all it said was, "Take care." Barbara does not have a car. She walked everywhere. If you have information, please call 707-463-4086. This is the 1-minute case of Bradley Thompson. Viewer discretion is advised. Bradley Milan Thompson is a 44-year-old painting contractor. He was known to have some involvement in drugs, but outside of that, there really isn't much information. He was last seen on February 24th, 2005, in his 1989 Ford pickup truck, and this is in Humboldt County, California. The Humboldt County Sheriff's Department for a time considered this a missing persons that was a little suspicious, but they really wouldn't say foul play was involved. In November of 2008, there were skeletal remains found in a quarry pit in Humboldt County. No, not this one. From what I can see, they were actually identified as being Bradley Thompson's, but no cause of death was released, and they say they are still investigating this. And unbelievably, that is it. I have nothing else. I mean, how can that be it? This is a person. If you have information, please call 707-268-3644. Hello, true crimerers. This is the 1-minute case of Carl Bittner. Viewer discretion is advised. Unfortunately, I do not know much about Carl. According to his family, who at this point was living in a different state than him, Carl was a transient in 2002. He was homeless and living in a tent, but according to a letter he sent his family, he had saved up enough money to purchase a trailer, and his life was going back up on the upswing. But then in 2002, Carl falls off the face of the earth, never to be seen or heard from again. In 2004, in some vacant field in a shallow grave, a man's body was found. It would later be confirmed to be the body of Carl Bittner. His death was ruled a homicide, but outside of that, there's not much information. By the way, he went missing from and was found in Salt Creek, Nebraska. If you have information, please call 402-475-3600. This is the 1-minute missing persons case of Chelsea Grimm. 32-year-old Chelsea Grimm was from San Diego, California. On September 24th, 2023, Chelsea left her home in San Diego to drive to Connecticut for a wedding. On September 27th, 2023, she was in Phoenix, Arizona visiting a sister. And then later that day, she was observed at a hotel trying to book a room. The person there said she seemed to be disoriented. She was trying to use euros and not US dollars. Then she called her parents and said she would not be making the wedding in Connecticut because the trip was taking longer than she thought. She told them she planned to camp nearby. On September 28, 2023, she was observed by a police officer in Williams County, Arizona. She was taking photographs. She was then seen in Ash Fork, Arizona on September 30th, and then nobody saw her ever again. On October 3rd, 2023, her white Ford Escape was found abandoned with 2 flat tires. Chelsea and her pet bearded dragon, along with her wallet and cell phone, have never been found. If you have any information, please contact this number immediately. This is the 1-minute murder case of Dawn Lamont and Gail Jordan. Viewer discretion is advised. 17-year-old Dawn and 18-year-old Gail were best friends. They were from Magnolia, Texas. On the night of July 13th, 1991, the two girls decided to go see a movie. The movie was playing about 7 miles away in Tomball, Texas. So they met up and the two of them left in Dawn's pickup truck. Then they head down Farm to Market Road 1774, and Dawn's truck broke down. So they decided to walk down the road to a nearby friend's house. They never made it. I believe this was after the movie. Between midnight and 2 a.m., it is believed that both women were struck and killed by a vehicle while walking down the road. Evidence left behind indicates it was a 1983 or 1984 Chevy truck or a Suburban or a Blazer. They don't know if this was a hit and run or if this was intentional, but this was murder. Their killer has never been found. If you have information, please call 936-873-2000. This is the 1-minute case of Edna Reichart. Viewer discretion is advised. The only thing I know about Edna was that she was born on September 12, 1903 in Millbrook, Illinois, but at the time of this case, she is living in Lansing, Michigan. Edna's entire case comes down to one single sentence. It was October 19, 1980 here at Tecumseh Park in Lansing, Michigan. Floating in the water was the body of 77-year-old Edna Reichart. She had been strangled to death, and this was ruled a homicide. But that's it. That's the entire case. I don't know if they had DNA, if they had fingerprints, if they have any physical evidence whatsoever. I don't know if they searched her home to see if they could find any evidence there. There is virtually nothing published about her story. And so all I can really say is if you have information about the murder of Edna Reichart, please call 517-483-4600. A 15-year-old kid is currently missing in South Carolina. Hello, true crimeers. This is the case of Ezra McBride. Viewer discretion is advised. Unfortunately, there are very, very few details about this case. But on February 4th, 2024, which was about 5 days ago from me making this video, 15-year-old Ezra McBride was seen walking away from his home at approximately 4 o'clock in the morning. And this was in West Columbia in Lexington County, South Carolina. Again, he is 15 years old and he has not been found yet. He is a 15-year-old black male with brown eyes and brown hair, approximately 5'11" and 120 pounds. He was last seen wearing a black hoodie with gray hand symbols, splash of red on upper right shoulder, black pants, and black and white dunks. If you have information, please call 803-673-0013. And this TikToker is one of his family members that you can also reach out to. This is the 1-minute murder case of Gavin Hunter. Viewer discretion is advised. So this particular story happened in Etobicoke, which is in Ontario, Canada. Unfortunately, there is virtually no information, though, about the case. But on Friday, October 12th, 2001, here at 53 Silverstone Drive, near Finch Avenue West and Martin Grove Road, there was a Honda discovered with a passenger inside who appeared to be deceased. That passenger was 22-year-old Gavin Hunter. The body was discovered at 8:05 a.m. and it was clear that he had been shot to death. And according to local police, people just were not cooperating at the time of the investigation, and that led them to really get nowhere with this case. And unfortunately, that's all the information I have on Gavin's story. But Gavin deserves justice. So if you have information, please call 416-222-8477. This is the 1-minute murder case of Homer Abel. Viewer discretion is advised. This particular story happened just a couple of miles east of Rifle, Colorado, and it was off of Highway 6 at the Azamara gas station. On February 27th, 1984, Homer Abel, who was a gas station attendant there, he was found shot and killed there at the gas station. They believe this occurred during a robbery. The suspect was described as a young white male, approximately 5 feet 8 inches tall, about 150 to 170 pounds. He had dark hair with a dark beard and a trimmed mustache. They believe he may have been driving a dark-colored, full-sized, American-made pickup truck with a white camper. It's been about 40 years, so the suspect would likely be in their 60s now. If you have any information, please call the Garfield County Sheriff's Department at 970-945-0453. Hello, true crimerers. This is the 1-minute case of Hugh Duggins. Viewer discretion is advised. On January 21st, 2016, the body of a man was found just dumped off the side of the road, Alder Point Road, near Humboldt County, California. The body would be identified as 71-year-old Hugh Ray Duggins. He had either been strangled by someone's hands or by someone using like a rope. The 71-year-old man is considered a gentle giant, a free spirit, someone who was quoted as saying, "I don't fear death, I've had plenty of fun in my life. I've loved and I've been loved." He was just described as someone with a really huge personality. But he also really had no enemies. No one knew who would want to do this to him. And why? How did this even happen? And that's exactly what the Humboldt County Sheriff's Department is asking from the public, because they are at a standstill. They have no idea who did this. If you have information, please call 707-445-7251. This is the 1-minute missing or murdered Indigenous woman case of Janice Marie Hannigan. Viewer discretion is advised. At the time of this case, Janice was a 16-year-old high school student. She was a member of the Yakama Nation, and she was living with her father in Wapato, Washington. She was one of 7 children. Her parents had recently separated. Her 6 siblings stayed with their mom while she remained with her dad. On December 21st, 1971, Janice would enter a hospital because she had a bunch of bruises on her. The only records that still remain says that she was released from the hospital on December 24th, 1971. The cause of those bruises is unknown. They said she left the hospital in good condition. What hospital she went to is also unknown. But she left and then just disappeared off the face of the earth. At one point they thought maybe she was a runaway, but now she is presumed dead. The police also misgave her disappearance date by a lot. If you have information, you can call this number here. This is the 1-minute case of Carrie Hoover. Viewer discretion is advised. This case happened in 1987 in American Canyon, California. 21-year-old Carrie Hoover was living at a board and care home for developmentally disabled individuals. On the afternoon of March 20th, 1987, Carrie left the facility, which they're allowed to do, and she was going to go to a nearby shopping center. But Carrie never returned home to the center. 2 days later, just outside of that shopping center where she was supposed to be going, her body was found. She had been tossed in some bushes, and she was found by children. Her cause of death was strangulation, but there were no signs of sexual assault and no signs of robbery. Witnesses said she was seen talking to 2 younger black men before she disappeared. Police found those 2 men and questioned them both extensively, but have never arrested them. And unfortunately, that's all the information I have. If you have information, please call 707-253-4591. This is the 1-minute missing persons case of Corey Glossett. Viewer discretion is advised. At the time of this case, Corey Glossett was 25 years old and living in Van Wert, Ohio. The last time his family heard from him was June 16th, 2016. However, on June 24th, 2016, he was bonded out of jail by this man here, Dale Gear. According to Dale, Corey spent the night at his place that evening, and then he says he dropped Corey off in Van Wert the following day. Corey was officially reported missing on July 21st, 2016. There was speculation that he may have gone to Knoxville, Tennessee because he said he wanted to go there, but they checked and he was nowhere in that area. He also left his cell phone and all his belongings behind. Police would discover that Dale Gear lied about some of his statements, and they actually got a warrant to search his home and his truck. They found blood in both locations. That blood belonged to Corey Glossett. Dale Gear was charged with tampering with evidence, but no other charges have been placed yet, and that's because Corey is still missing. A body found buried on a beach. Hello, true crimerers. This is the 1-minute case of Matthew Peak. Viewer discretion is advised. The story happened in Waipio Valley in Hawaii, and it was on June 1st, 1999, when two beachgoers discovered something horrific. On a nearby beach, they found what looked like something sticking out of the sand. This is not the actual image, but it was a human body. So police were called. The body was in a pretty decent state of decomposition. The coroner would take fingerprints, and it would match a man named Matthew Peak. His cause of death was asphyxiation. I don't know if that means he died being buried in the sand or what, but he was a known hitchhiker in that area of Waipio Valley. But that's all there really is. This is ruled a homicide. There is a $1,000 reward. If you have information, please call Crime Stoppers at 961-8300. Someone killed Matthew, and he deserves justice. This is the 1-minute missing persons case of Patricia Seelbaugh. Patricia was from Grove City, Pennsylvania. At the time of this case, she was 17 years old. On the night of October 26, 1973, Patricia went out with some friends. They, went to a truck stop off Interstate 80, just east of the Interstate 79, and I guess that was specifically in Barkeyville, Pennsylvania. And then she was, seen being dropped off with an unknown male at a residence outside of Grove City, Pennsylvania, in an area that it was more known, as Hallville, and this was around midnight that night. Patricia has never been seen since. No one has seen or heard from her at all. So if you have information about the whereabouts or what happened to Patricia Seelbaugh, please call 724-662-6162. This is the 1-minute missing persons case of Paula Schulz. Viewer discretion is advised. On April 13th, 1995, the Mendocino County Sheriff's Department in California, they were contacted to report the disappearance of 45-year-old Paula Jan Schulz. Paula lived in Laytonville, California. When police started digging into this, they realized that no one had actually seen Paula since the very beginning of April. So it had been a couple of weeks since anyone had spotted her. The last time someone did see her, she was in Hot Springs, California with her 6 dogs, where she got into some kind of fight, a verbal fight with someone. And then allegedly, she walked away with her dogs and was never seen again. And unfortunately, that's all I have. This was way back in 1995. She was 5'6", 130 pounds. And if anyone has information, please contact the Sheriff's Department at 707-234-2100. This is the 1-minute case of Peggy Ann Cottrell. Viewer discretion is advised. This case happened here in Marshalltown, Iowa back in 2001. Cottrell was 66 years old at the time, and at 6:30 p.m. on May 26, 2001, her family member would drop her off here at the Southridge nursing home because that's where she actually lived. But after her relative dropped her off there, something unusual happened. The 66-year-old woman was then seen running from the nursing home. She was not being chased by anyone, and allegedly nobody at the nursing home knows why she did this. She does take medications for what they say are unspecified reasons, but she had all those medications back at the nursing home. Several weeks later, her purse is found along the banks of the Iowa River, and it had her ID, her cash, everything. But she's never been found, and they have no idea what happened to her. But that's all the information I have. If you have information on her whereabouts, please call 641-754-5725. This is the 1-minute case of Robertina Hellman. Viewer discretion is advised. It's kind of wild that there really isn't much information about this case, but here it is. At the time of this case, Robertina Hellman was an 18-year-old high school student who was actually living in her own apartment. She lived here at 5826 East 71st Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And on May 14th, 1991, the 18-year-old girl was found murdered inside the apartment. A neighbor had alerted the leasing office because her sliding glass door was wide open, and she became concerned. And so when the leasing agent walked in, they found the body. Robertina was head first into a bathtub full of water, but her cause of death was strangulation. There was no signs of forced entry, but the apartment looked ransacked. But I don't know if anything was stolen. There's also no info if she was sexually assaulted or not. And like I said, she lived alone. But that's all the information I have. So if you have information, please call 918-591-4000. This is the 1-minute missing persons case of Roy Lane Jr. This case occurred in Clay City, Kentucky. 29-year-old Roy Lane Jr. was last seen leaving a gas station there in Clay City, Kentucky on March 16, 2018. Roy was officially reported missing on March 23, 2016. Since then, there have been numerous searches for the man, but they have come up with absolutely nothing. They have gotten a couple of tips over the past couple of years, telling them to look in certain places for his body. But every time they search, every time they look, and they've dug in the places where they've been told to dig, they've come up empty. They do still continue to search, but it does sound like police believe he is deceased. But the circumstances behind it are completely unknown. There is essentially no information with regards to the circumstances of how he vanished. There is a reward for information that helps lead to finding him. If you have information, please call 606-663-2226. This is the 1-minute case of Tammy Jarvis. Viewer discretion is advised. This story happened in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and unfortunately I have very minimal information. Tammy Jarvis was a 20-year-old mother who was living with her aunt in Baton Rouge, but her aunt was out of town when this incident happened. The only real information there is that on May 10th, 1989, neighbors would see Tammy Jarvis being dragged away forcefully from her aunt's backyard by her boyfriend who had a shotgun with him. And that is it. That's it. She has never been seen since by anyone. And unbelievably, the boyfriend was never charged with any connection to this. However, in 1992, I can't find his actual name, but in 1992, he was convicted of second-degree murder for shooting another girlfriend with a shotgun. Did he do the same to Tammy, and where is she? If you have information, please call 225-389-8617. This is the 1-minute case of the Phillips siblings. Viewer discretion is advised. There is an alarmingly small amount of information about this case. 26-year-old Paula Phillips was last seen in Tulsa, Oklahoma on October 3rd, 1991. She left her apartment to go to the store. She never returned. Her 20-year-old brother Donald Phillips would report her missing. Police arrived at his house on October 10th, but he is not there, and he has never been seen again. And then a year later, on November 22nd, 1992, their 21-year-old sister, Londa Phillips, also disappeared. And allegedly, police have no idea what's going on here. You've got 3 siblings from the same home all go missing from the same place, all within a year of each other. Police did say that there may be a drug connection to this, but they're not sure. If you have information, please call 918-596-9143. This is the 1-minute missing or murdered Indigenous woman case of Tiana Lee Raincloud. Viewer discretion is advised. Tiana Lee Raincloud was a member of the Yakima Nation, and she was living in Wapdo, Washington. At approximately 11 p.m. on March 30th, 2021, police were called to this location because of a shooting. When they arrived, they did find 2 people had been shot. One of them was 20-year-old Tiana Lee Raincloud. She had a gunshot wound to her torso, and she was pronounced dead at the scene. There's very little information about this case, which sadly is not surprising, but I don't know what happened to the other individual. All I really know about this case is that her death was ruled a homicide, and that's it. There's no other information. There's no updates or anything. I don't have descriptions of who may have done this, but she deserves justice. So if you have information, please call 206-622-0460. This is the 1-minute case of Wendy Louise Felton. Viewer discretion is advised. This case happened in Marion, Indiana, and it was 1987. Wendy Felton was a 16-year-old girl who lived with her parents and her sister. On June 4th, 1987, Wendy's sister would end up dropping off their parents at the airport. This was around 2 o'clock. When she left, Wendy was at home, but when she got back home at 5 p.m., Wendy was gone. Wendy's purse was there, her money was there. All of her belongings were there. But Wendy has never been seen since. She literally just vanished. Her social security number has never been used. There have been 0 sightings of her. At first, police considered her a runaway, but then later they changed it to she was endangered missing. But that is all the info I have on this case. If alive today, she may look something similar to this. If you have any information, please call 765-668-8168. Help bring her home.
Yo ho, all hands hoist the colors high. Heave ho, thieves and beggars, never shall we die.
Renaissance. Serial killers.
Catalina the Castrator.
Michelangelo Wayne Medici.
Anastasia Arias Anthony.
Giovanni the Thinker Brain Remover.
Phyllis.
This is one of the worst freak accidents. Viewer discretion is advised. Subscribe for more true crime content. On September 24th, 2015, shortly after 11 o'clock in the morning, a Ride the Ducks amphibious tour bus, it boarded 36 passengers to do a tour around the Seattle area. And this would include having to go onto the Aurora Bridge. At the same time this vehicle was on the bridge, a charter bus from a community college was also there. When suddenly, a mechanical error in the Ride the Ducks vehicle with the steering portion malfunctioned. The duck vehicle will then slam into the bus, creating a massive gash, and 5 people inside the bus would die on impact, and 69 other people were injured. Everyone on this vehicle survived. It turns out the issue with the duck vehicle was known by the company but never repaired, which would lead to them giving out $140 million plus in lawsuits, and they went bankrupt.
Yep, it worked. Oh my god!
When questioned by police, she would throw her head back and cackle and say, "I just wanted to watch the world squirm." The lead detective said, quote, "This is the worst case that I have ever seen in my 30-plus year career." She was charged with 666 counts of assault of the senses and over 1 billion charges of attempted murder via TikTok. She was convicted and will never see the light of day again. The Hot Dog Council of America has refused to comment, but they have removed every hot dog from every shelf of every grocery store across America. The National Pickle Foundation has just said, quote, "May Pickle Rick have mercy on her soul." Hello, true crimerers. This is the 1-minute missing persons case of Ben Tyner. Subscribe for more true crime content. There's not a lot of information on this case, but 33-year-old Ben Tyner was a manager of the Nicola Ranch, which is located in Merritt, British Columbia, Canada. Ben was last seen on January 26, 2019. On January 28th, his horse was found, but Ben was nowhere to be seen. The horse was found off Highway 97 near Winnie Flats. He was reported missing and police began investigating right away. The RCMP has said that they have gotten tips and information from people, but they have not released that to the public in order to protect the case itself. They have said that they do believe he met with foul play and he was likely murdered. There is now a $30,000 reward for any information that leads to his discovery. And that's all I have. If you have information about this case, please call 877-987-8477. Help bring Ben home. Hello, true crimerers. This is a 1-minute missing persons story, and it happened on Halloween. Pictured here is 31-year-old Cameron Hardman. He lived in Sharon Hill, Pennsylvania. It was Halloween 2011. He left an address on Newland Avenue, and his destination was the 4500 block of Carmack Street, and he was driving his black 2001 BMW, but he never made it to his destination. His family would report him missing rather quickly, and then on November 7th, 2011, his BMW was found. His cell phone and his wallet were inside the car, but he was gone. Cameron has no criminal history. He's never left home like this before, and he has not been seen ever since. They don't know if foul play is involved or not. No sign of foul play in his car, but it was 7 blocks away from where he was supposed to go. If you have information, please call 610-583-3245. This is one of the worst deaths imaginable. Viewer discretion is advised. So this is one of those crushers on the back of like a garbage truck that literally just pulls in the garbage no matter what it is. It just sucks it in and it crushes it. This is just another example of how it takes the garbage in. Well, in July of 2015, it's believed this took place in China. A man was caught on CCTV footage. He had turned his back to one of these crushers, and it's this thing right behind him. He slips and he falls inside. And then what takes place is absolutely horrible. His body is basically taken in right in the middle by his waist, and he is slowly folded in half as he is pulled through this machine. And there was absolutely no chance of survival. Over the course of about 6 to 7 seconds, his entire body was slowly crushed. Pure hell. This is one of the worst deaths imaginable. Viewer discretion is advised. This was 88-year-old Hilda Vitor Maciel of Brazil. On September 27, 2011, she was admitted into a hospital because she had suffered a stroke. However, after spending about a few days there, her family says she appeared to be on the upswing. Now, she was on a feeding tube at the time. She also had her typical IVs on her as well. A few days into her stay, a nurse came into the room to feed her through her feeding tube. She had a syringe full of soup. The nurse injected the soup into one of the IVs, thinking it was the feeding tube. It was not. She had mistakenly injected the soup directly into the IV going into her veins. Moments later, she had a seizure, and 12 hours later, she died of a pulmonary embolism. I don't know the outcome of the lawsuit.